there are more than enough people, it's not even by a super small margin, that say they would have changed their vote had they been exposed to that information before that election. The fact is that was systematically suppressed in what was probably the single greatest form of election interference in American history.
And
there was a lot of discussion. If I may just finish this just to get the full freight of my view.
Yeah.
There was a lot of discussion on the legitimacy of the 2016 election on the back of Russian election interference that actually, it turns out, was actually much smaller scale than surmised. But on the day of Trump's inauguration, there was a lot of discussion. Hillary Clinton called the election result illegitimate. It said that it was partly the product of Russian election interference. Whatever that was, that pales in comparison, to the effect of the systematic suppression on domestic soil of a story that 2 years later, every news outlet in this country has absolutely admitted was indeed true when it was systematically suppressed at the time. So you ask the question, is there any basis? There's your basis.
And it is, do you have an opinion as to, is it the explicit pictures of Hunter that would have in some way changed people's minds, or the as of yet unproven claims that Joe Biden is involved in some kind of bribery fraud scheme, or like what about it?
So I'm not speaking for the survey respondents, but I can tell you what speaks to me.
Yeah,
actually. Yeah, because I wouldn't have changed my vote. I voted for Trump, right? So I wasn't one of the survey respondents who said I would have changed my vote because of it. Good. So here's what does speak to me, and I think it's relevant. Let's just take this outside the scope of political partisanship. The Burisma payments to Hunter Biden are a deep problem. $5 million paid by a Ukrainian company, privately owned by somebody who at the time was sitting on the National Security Council in Ukraine. Relevant now because A, it did result in an impeachment of a U.S. president who called, that was Trump, who called for further investigation of that in Ukraine, but that wasn't the only geopolitical consequence of it. I think it has deep-seated implications even now for, say what many people on Russia's side of this say. Well, you have a U.S. president whose son was dealing, when that person was vice president, with actually the Ukrainian government indirectly, accepting what in any other context we would call bribes. So much so that President Obama's staff actually raised this with Biden, only to be shouted down by it. This is a bipartisan concern. That's a real issue. Also, the shell companies created to do business with China and the Chinese government, again paid millions of dollars. That is relevant information on the eve of a presidential election. With the fourth largest newspaper in circulation, the New York Post, founded by Alexander Hamilton, had its social media accounts locked for publishing a story, where you and I would have had our accounts locked for even sending it via direct message or email. So I think we have to go back and reconcile ourselves with that. We have to reckon with that and admit what went wrong if we're actually to move forward in the future. Sweeping that under the rug and relegating that to be the concern of rubes that live in the middle of the country and are election deniers, I think is the wrong approach for us to heal as a country. I think we have to reckon with the fact that we did that as a nation. The United States of America, we let that happen. Admit that. And my view is nations make mistakes. You can move forward if you understand those mistakes, but we have to be open about it.
So, not to stay on this, but to summarize, in terms of a factual vote dumps or sandwiches and ballots under the table or Vance backing in, Mike Lindell, cyber guys looking for bamboo fibers on the ballots, you're not talking about any of that. You're simply saying, had some people known about the allegations related to Hunter Biden at the time, enough people in some states might have changed the
If that's the case, that's not a systematically top-down surprise. I think there's good data to suggest it could have changed the result of the election.
Okay, good. And the point, again, is not to debate it with you, but to get your position on the record.
It's data-driven, so it's not.
I'm super interested in your campaign because you are right now one of the people that Donald Trump is saying nice things about in general. He mispronounces your name badly, Ramaswamy, which you may care about, you may not. That's for you to decide. But
it's been an affliction about it. But I'm going to keep good. Best effort, but I appreciate it.
He generally saying the reason you're surging, he said this Saturday, is because you're actually mostly treating him well, treating him fairly, etc. You're roughly polling 5% right now. The Real Clear Politics average, I'm sure there are anecdotal polls that have you higher and lower, but the Real Clear Politics average has you right around 5 right now.
I'm a distant third at 5.
You're distant third at 5. You do seem to have taken a commanding position ahead of Mike Pence, though, and that we can talk about as well. My question is, from a practical standpoint, is your perspective on Trump calculated in order to sort of be there in case Trump really can't run a campaign because he gets arrested a third, a fourth, a fifth time, maybe even sixth? Is the idea not to turn off the MAGA voter so that if Trump hits trouble, they go to you rather than maybe DeSantis or somebody else? Is that a consideration?
It's not a political calculation. My whole political strategy is to speak the truth, at least share my beliefs, tell the people who I am and what I stand for, and leave the voters to decide whether that's what they want. Okay? So if I come out of this election, everybody in this country knows who I am and what I stand for, and that's what they want. The more I learn about and the experiences I have, the more difficult I realize how hard that is for certainly me and probably any other candidate to actually achieve that goal. But anyway, the reason I'm saying what I am, I actually do believe that Donald Trump was an effective president. He was an effective president, no doubt about it. I think he was a good president with whom I agree on most policy questions. The reason I'm in this race is that, A, I believe I can take that agenda even further than you, and unite the country in the process. Because for whatever reason, and I don't blame him for this, but I think it's just a fact, that about 30% of this country becomes, no, I would say mentally ill, psychiatrically ill.
I would say that.
Yeah, and they agree with things that they otherwise wouldn't agree with. They start disagreeing with things they otherwise would have agreed with because he's saying. And I think that for whatever reason, I'm not yet having that effect on people, and I don't think I will.
No,
And that allows us
seem
to
to make
unite the
people
country.
crazy. You know, the interesting thing about the psychiatric thing, you know, your background is in, if I understand, undergrad biology and then business. Mine's in economics and communication. Neither one of us are doctors. But one of the interesting things is I was in Chicago last weekend. I was sitting very close proximity to a table of the PAC folks who were talking about the primary, and I was just listening in like a fly on the wall. It was an incredible sociological experience. It was aggressive. I was out of my bubble. And they start talking about, you know who's really in charge? It's Obama, the military. And then someone else says, you know, the vaccine, this and that, and the other thing. And someone else says, you know, we got to get rid of the deep state. And one guy goes, you know who I like? I like that Indian guy. They didn't know your name. They didn't know your name, but they referred to you as that Indian guy because he's not part of the deep state, and et cetera, et cetera. The definition of what we mean by psychiatric illness, a lot of the stuff I'm hearing from folks about JFK Jr.'s alive and all this different conspiracy stuff that surrounds MAGA, it seems as though when we start just saying psychiatric illness, I don't know if it gets us to where the country is and what would be best for it necessarily, which is why I wonder about this talking point you came up with about Trump makes a third of the country psychiatrically ill. What are you getting at when you say that?
I mean, divisive. Well, I think that I'm describing the fact of many people in this country disagreeing with policies that they otherwise would have agreed with, that I believe are good for this country, that Trump believes are good for this country, that they put themselves at odds with just because he's the person I see important. Like at the southern border, for example. I went to speak in Chicago. I'll remind me of my experience of going to Chicago.
You didn't sit next to these people I sat next to.
No, and actually, I shared a view to get outside my bubble too.
Yeah.
I went to the south side of Chicago, where Republican candidates don't go. Right.
No.
90%
No.
viewed as a deep Democrat country. We held a couple of town halls. I got my haircut at the barbershop. We visited South Shore High School in Chicago, which is partly being converted into an encampment for migrants who are crossing the southern border. I'll tell you what I found. I found some of the most ardent supporters of sealing the southern border who I have met in my life didn't come at a conservative MAGA rally. It came on the south side of Chicago. And I think that that's just one example among many. I found some of the fiercest opposition to our war in Ukraine, which, by the way, I share common. So I don't think the real partisan boundaries that the media teaches us to accept, those aren't the real divisions in this country right now. I think there are different divisions. They do not track traditional Republican Democrat boundaries. That's an artificial projection.
Are they class divisions more so, or what are they?
Well, I see it as, I cut it through, I think there's some element of class division. I think that there's a deeper division between what I call the managerial class and the citizen. And I think the managerial class pervades multiple institutions. It's not just in government. That is what we call the deep state. And believe me, I care about this phenomenon and believe I understand it deeply. But there's a sort of horizontal managerial class. The same kinds of people, if not some of the same people, who are the associate deans of God knows what at a proliferating cancer of managerialism at universities, that professionally sit on corporate boards, of the ambassador of God knows what to some third world, sort of second nation as a gig that they take on. This is the undersecretary of the president of the next administration. It's the rise of the managerial class that wields far more power than our founding fathers envisioned. And I think part of what we're missing in this country is a three-branch constitutional republic with three co-equal branches of government, where the people who we elect to run the government in the executive and legislative branches are actually the ones who run the government. That is not the case today. And so I have no doubt that there's plenty of occasion for folks who step outside their bubble, whoever that is, to roll their eyes whenever they walk into that other room and walk out, dismiss whoever they heard as a bunch of crazies.
Well, Obama's still in charge secretly for the military. He's a little nuts, right?
Well, let me just that's fast on. Okay? Let's just double click on that. What's the intuition? What's the intuition there? The intuition is that Joe Biden, the newly elected president of the United States, supposedly, the person in charge, is actually in charge, making the decisions. I don't think he is. I don't think many people in the Democratic Party think that he is. I think it is a managerial class that finds him as a convenient vehicle for advancing a particular agenda.
Okay, but are there any of these examples in fact, like you talk to Trump rallies and they say Trump is actually still in charge, the generals support most, are you willing to say is there some version of that one that you think
Trump is not in charge. That's why he is taking great pains to run for president of the United States.
Okay, so that one's just wrong. That one you're not going to equivocate on.
But is it David or Peck? How do you describe this?
You know, you can call me anything you want.
Okay, got it. I'll call you David. And thank you for saying my name correctly. It is a baby. So, here's what I will say. I think you and I share this in common. I'll speak for myself, and I'll give you the assumption to start with that you share this in common. Is sure. We care about reviving a national identity and a nation we can be proud of that is united around the principles that set us into motion 250 years ago. That's certainly what I care about. I think that is still possible in this country. I don't know that 20 years from now will be possible. I think it's still possible in this country right now. I think you and I are not on the side of national principles. If that's the case, then we need to be able to pierce through what somebody, because I went on the Breakfast Club. I don't know if you see that.
I saw it, of course.
Yeah, we did. So I faced prep. I appreciate that. Deep prep. I appreciate it. So I had a moment in that interview where I could probably have done to this woman, I forget her name, what you might be able to do to the people who were in that room with you in Illinois. Just take a speck of what she said and then just say, this is my occasion to marry her. I kind of had that moment on set with Don Lemon and decided to take it. Don Lemon's different. That's not an objective. My question is, what's going on underneath the surface? Yeah, and I think what's going on underneath the surface in our country, that's right, is that we are all starved. Not even hungry anymore. We are starved for purpose and meaning and identity. At a time in our national history when the things that used to ground us in our identity, faith, patriotism, hard work, family, these things have largely disappeared. That leaves a moral vacuum, a black hole in its way. And when Well, you have a black hole that runs that deep. Poison fills the void. And so what we need to do is to fill that void with a vision of, in my opinion, American national identity without apology. To dilute that poison to irrelevance. That is what we're starting with. As it relates to the conspiracy theorizing on the right, sure, that is as you'll label it. So first of all, I think it's worth just doing a recounting of the last 24 months in this country. Right? We were told that a virus that did not originate in a lab in Wuhan, if you said it did, then you were racist and had your social media accounts.
Okay, if
We now know that it originated,
only
right?
because we have limited time and we have gotten this list so many times.
Yep.
I know where you're going with this, which is sometimes people have been wrong
Not
about
sometimes,
certain
many
things.
times would be my only point. 'Cause
That's
I've been going for a long
totally
time. In the last 2 years.
Yeah.
So we have to, we got to be on a point where I think that alone is prima facie evidence, okay, that it's not enough to just point to the ridiculous facial claim that somebody makes and sort of narrowly solve or can you denounce that as false? You're playing the wrong game, especially against the backdrop that is not reading a room correctly.
Yeah.
Where time and again, and so you'll come out appropriately because you know this as well as I do. But time and again, it has to be measured against the backdrop of every major instance that has been systematically suppressed has come out that had some element of truth to it.
Fair.
And I think it's that backdrop.
If it's okay with you, so I can hit a couple other things.
Yeah.
I want to leave it at, I think there's a difference between recognizing that, for example, how effective vaccines are against the latest variant is different than Trump is in control right now with the score and a loyalty vote. As long as we can agree those are two different things and we can talk about both, we can maybe hit a couple other things. Is that cool?
Yeah.
Fair. I think we're on the same page. Good. I have to talk to you about woke and wokeness. You wrote the book. It's in the title. One of the things I'm interested in when it comes to the anti-woke movement and woke as a cancer or a problem is that there's about a half dozen or more polls that show that wokeness seems to be the predominant perspective if you look at the whole country. I won't give you the full list, but just so we put a couple here, there's one poll from Pew which finds that about 6 in 10 Americans say on the issue of going far enough, the right distance or not far enough on making trans people feel okay, not discriminated against, understanding their issues. 60% say we did the right note, or we actually have not gone far enough. There's one from The Hill about 60% of the country is against any restrictions on drag performances. This is the sort of thing I'm talking about. Maybe we can see the numbers, maybe we can look at some of the data I work. Doesn't it seem as though the anti-woke idea is maybe overplaying a hand that might do well in some parts of the country, but won't win a national campaign, as evidenced by what Ron DeSantis is seeing right now, losing 42% of his support in the primary?
So, I want to say something, which I've said before, but it doesn't even matter, but I'm going to say it anyway. Is the media seems to be the one that uses a label of anti-woke to describe my campaign. I am running a campaign to revive national identity. At the time I wrote woke game.
Yeah.
You know when people criticized the title back then? People said nobody knows what this word is. Okay. So at the time I wrote the book, that was actually the chief criticism of the title. And unlike many on both the left and right, I will define exactly what it is.
Oh, okay.
That I view as a symptom of a deeper malaise in our.
I thought you were going to define woke itself.
No, well, wokeness is a symptom, and I will define the symptom, but it's also a deeper cancer. Wokeness is a worldview that says that there are certain invisible social relationships between us, grounded on oppression or oppressor relationships and statuses of people, based on race, gender, and sexuality. That you're either oppressor or oppressed, based on those genetic attributes. That there are invisible societal injustices resulting from them, and that we have to be awake, alert to those injustices, and then correct them. Left or right, I think that's a neutral definition that describes at least what we're talking about.
I have a different one, which is much simpler, which is simply becoming woke is becoming aware that there are problems in our society bigger than any one person's circumstances. That's how I define it. And I know it's very different from what you're saying.
That's a slightly different definition and one that is set up for more people to agree with it. But I think that that's not. I respectfully, David. That's a.
that's a definition that on its own does not support the specificity of policies that follow from it, right? Racial quota systems and board rules. The fact that a company cannot list on NASDAQ unless it has a certain number of quotas filled by racial minorities or sexual minorities on its board. That is a much more specific instantiation that closely tracks my definition of wokeness than a general definition that there are just things wrong in the world, there are systems that don't result in individual behavior. Well, okay, that's a big leap to get from there to racial quota systems, especially when actually in that very rule, and I'm just triple clicking on that just to get specific, but it is not an outlier, it is an example of what we see pervasively. Where people then came back and said, well, how about veteran status or disability status? To which the government, the SEC, and the NASDAQ said no, because that would reduce the desired forms of diversity on that board. So we are talking about very specific instantiations of a culture that we can't just elide in the form of a general neutral definition that there are some unfair systems and we need to correct for them. That's not the essence of the claim that alone would support the range of policies that we see. And so I think we often owe it to ourselves to at least be specific and get on the table, where I'll give Ibram Kendi at least some credit for being specific when he expressly says the right answer to past discrimination is present discrimination. The right answer to present discrimination is future discrimination. Those are his words, not mine. You take people like Ayanna Pressley at their word. We don't want any more black or brown faces that don't want to be a black or brown voice. I know that's a little bit uncomfortable to smoke out because it makes a lot of my friends on the left uncomfortable because they don't want to agree with those exact statements, even though they do want to agree with the more neutral definition of wokeness that you provided. But we have to smoke that out, where there are policies that directly track what the leading advocates of this movement have said in their own words. That's not me putting words into anybody else's mouth. I think we just have to own that up and get that on the table so we can actually have an honest and clean-hearted debate about it.
Yeah,
Right?
what's
Because
interesting
right or
about
wrong.
that is most of the examples you're coming up with as someone on the progressive left are not examples I would defend. And simultaneously, it sounds like you're also not denying that when it comes to the way we treat people, when it comes to the questions asked in these polls about wokeness, when it comes to trans, controlling books, drag shows, etc., I'm not hearing that that's actually the fight you really want to have, which if that's the case, I like that. I think that that's good.
Yeah, well, here's the one fight on that narrow issue that I do care to have is as it relates to kids.
Okay.
So I believe that, and what I'm about to say is controversial to some, but I'm going to share my view, and I think it's grounded in history and fact, and at least my true perspective. I think that gender dysphoria, especially in kids, is a mental health condition that and should be treated as such. And for most of our history, all the way through the DSM-4, and I believe the DSM-5 has been viewed that way. When a kid says that their gender does not match their biological sex, that is usually evidence that something else is wrong in their life. We should get to the bottom of that. I do not believe it is compassionate to affirm that kid's confusion. I believe that is cruelty. I believe 20 years from now, we will look back at allowing kids to undergo genital mutilation and chemical castration in the way that we would also judge Iran for doing the same thing. In Iran, if you're gay, you know what they do? They make you undergo genital mutilation and sex change. I think many gay kids are going through the same thing today because of the trans fixation in really American culture right now. I met two young women, Chloe and Katie, both of whom badly regret decisions they made to undergo double hysterectomy as well as chemical castration. They will never, intervention. They will never be the same again either. I think that is American for the same reasons that we do not allow kids to get a tattoo before the age of 18. We should not allow kids to undergo genital mutilation or chemical castration.
Now, of course, you can get a tattoo before the age of 18 with parents' permission, and that's what many want to see.
Actually, many states can't.
I'm not aware of any such states, but I take your word that there are some where that's the case. Hey, listen, on that issue, and we're out of time, and I'm going to let you go because I know that that you have a lot of things to get to. On that issue, I do want to say that in every state I'm aware of, the issue of gender dysphoria in kids does start as a behavioral health intervention. I think the question becomes, and I don't pretend to have an answer to this question all the time. How far is it okay to go beyond that? I am with you that I don't yet believe we have the full 20.
And David, the one thing I will make with you on this too, and you seem like I appreciate your reasoned approach here to having a conversation, which they don't always get at, is
if gender dysphoria is such a condition of suffering, and I believe it is, rare instances in which it occurs, why on earth are we now going out of our way to create more of it? By purposefully leaving in the possibilities for gender confusion at ages where literally there's good evidence to back this up. When there's one case of gender dysphoria in a school, it spreads. Like you could do the R squared math on this, right? It's like you can compare that to COVID, the spread of COVID. You can epidemiologically model this stuff. Yes, this is actually having an effect that we're going out of our way to create a condition that we say creates more suffering. I'll give you one example in New Hampshire, where I travel frequently. The state just shot down a piece of legislation. All of it. They shot that bill down. Because premises that risk of suicide. And so a parent doesn't have the right to know if their kid's showing this or suicide. It says there's something else going on here.
Yeah,
Right?
I
It's not
expressed,
recognition.
we talked about one of those laws recently. I expressed the same concern. I understand the two forces here. The idea of we don't necessarily want to quote out a child that's not ready, or maybe out it in an unsafe home environment on the one hand. The other side being exactly what you're saying. So I think all of these issues are more complicated than both
David,
sides.
before we rock and roll on this, but I'm on a mission to lead not a political party but a nation, and I will share with you a commitment that I'm willing to make, and I hope that provides some inspiration to people who disagree with that nation. So I hope not. You're not about to offer. We have to do each other better. I think of smoking out the best part inside and so I provide only but what frustrates me, and it does frustrate me, is that I see a lot of right? I graduated from Calvin Glass at Harvard, been to Yale Law School, worked at a hedge fund people, let's just get real. Like, I know women that work, I know in some sense, like, you're not unfamiliar. And what I see amongst even my peers, right, is a sort of little laziness. I think I'm saying this out of respect and not an attack in a constructive way. I saw a little bit of it at the start of this conversation, right, where you're going to be able to smoke out a version of that which can be beneficial. These are our fellow citizens. And their concerns come from a deep place where if you can do a better job of articulating and smoking out where that comes from, then we have an obligation to do it. And that's what gives me my motivation. Where people will say, somebody living in 6 miles radius where I am in Central Ohio State, say, well, they say the First Amendment applies to 10 companies. They're really because they don't know that only applies to the government. Actually, to double click on that, it's not what turns out private actors do what the government does. In every instance, to be able to say that when there's something of value there, don't just sweep that under the carpet and smoke it out. Then let's have it. I can make that more trans case. I'll do the same. I think in general, I think 3 times now we deliberately very different kinds of issues. We have a real situation in this country where a whole bunch of people think Trump either won or didn't. Very different than tactical assessment. You've got to leave it there. That's
I only killed 2 people. They were the hardest people to kill. I know I shot more than 2 people, but I'm only into 2 lives. Not satisfied. Soul not fulfilled.